Welcome to the Inner Huddle Extra Time.
Have you ever wondered what professional football scouts look for when they're assessing children? Well, that's a question that's come in from Tommy, and I'm going to attempt to answer some of that on our first ever Extra Time podcast, which is part of the Inner Huddle series. And for those of you who watch or listen quite regularly, you'll notice that my right hand man Jeffrey's not here today. So this one is called Extra Time, and it's going to be all me on my own, all solo. So it's a good question for me to start with, because I am a scout for Southampton Football Club, registered with the Premier League, and I get asked this a lot. And just today I have put in a recommendation for an under 8 to be looked at by Southampton Football Club, and just a few weeks ago there was another one that went in for an under 11. So it's quite topical for me, so I thought, why not try and answer it? Now, there's no set answer to this question, and it's a very difficult one because there are many different factors that come into it, including whether you're watching the child in a match, or my preferred method is to watch them in training. And clearly, if you can watch both and as many times as possible, that would be great. So the obvious thing to say is, during a match, is the child making an impact in that match? And it can be in many different ways. It can be a defender that's dominating at the back and he's dealing with situations and quick players, or he's physically very good, or he could be coming out with the ball, or it could be a tricky winger that's taking players on and making things happen. It can be a forward that's scoring lots of goals, which is what a lot of parents think that scouts like to see, but is not true at all. But how any of these individuals are impacting, there's loads of different ways that they can impact. Could be a centre midfielder that's absolutely dominating the game and increasing the tempo of the game when they need to, and decreasing it when they need to, and game management. There are a million things that come into it. So for me personally, once I've seen what a player looks like when they're impacting on a game, the next stage for me is, how are they impacting, or how are they trying to impact when the chips are down? So when things aren't going so well. So that's character, and that's the biggest thing that I look for. So it's easy to dominate possibly when everything's going well. It's a nice day and your team's playing against someone who's maybe not as good as them, and they're getting a lot of the ball and it's all pretty and they're dominating. But what are they like when it's raining and it's frosty and it's cold and they're losing 3 or 4-0 and everything's going wrong and they're making mistakes? The scoreline's not going well. Do they go hiding, or do they still want the ball? And that's one of the big things I look for. That, and along with decision making. So even though things might not be going a player's way, are they still looking to make the right decisions? And most importantly, are they still wanting the ball and trying to make that similar impact as to what you originally saw in them in the first place? And I think there's a picture of my friend just over here, Andy Reid, who's been on one of our podcasts. When I was with him at Charlton Athletic, that's what I absolutely loved about him. We were in a relegation fight, and eventually we lost that fight, and we did get relegated to the Championship, but he always wanted the ball, and I think that's why Alan Pardew made him captain. He always wanted to make an impact on the game, and he never went hiding and he never went missing, and you can see that from a very early age. So that's character. I like to see children in training. I think it's something that scouts don't possibly do enough of. They seem to just go on what they see in a match, which I can understand why, because that's the real game and that's the environment that you want to see these players in. But their attitude to training is so important. It's potential over performance. So they might not be performing in the context of a match, but you see them in training and they've got all the attributes, all the characteristics. They have a growth mindset, which means that they like challenges and they want to step up to the plate and accept these challenges, and they have a great attitude to setbacks, and that they want to learn and that they want to improve. And those things, if you can marry that up with someone who's impacting in a game, then great, you're getting along the way to maybe getting a chance on getting what happens when you put a player in as a scout. They then have to get a second opinion and possibly a third, and have to be seen a few more times, and then people put reports in, and then there's a decision made on that person. And if it's an under 6, an under 7, or under 8, they'll go into a development centre, a pre-academy development centre, which I run in Salisbury with Jeff. And anything above that, they can then get offered a 6-week trial, which is a very difficult environment to go into. So from a scouting point of view, especially if I know these children, you have to be sure that they're mentally ready to go into that difficult environment. It's one thing, grassroots football, and it's completely different when you're going into a professional environment where no one really wants them to succeed. Obviously the coaches do, but your teammates don't particularly want them to succeed. Your teammates' parents don't particularly want them to succeed. And the opposition that you're playing against in those 6 weeks certainly don't want you to succeed. So it's a very difficult environment to subject a child to. So there's that psychological side of it as well. You have to be sure that they can cope with that, and it's not going to have any damaging effect, that experience, on their love for the game or their confidence in general. So there's so much goes into it when you're trying to decide whether a child is right, or a right fit for your club, or it's a right fit for them. Basically, in a nutshell, the way I look at it is there is a process that every child has to go through if they're going to fulfill their potential or get to the end bit, which is what we call the outcome. So the child, the parent, they want their child to be here, which is the outcome. Well, to get there, there's a process they have to go through, and that is hard work, dedication, desire, hunger, an attitude to training, having a growth mindset, all these little characteristics and how they are when the chips are down. That's the process. And if children don't love that process and don't enjoy that process, then they're never going to get there. So it doesn't matter how they're performing in matches, and how they're performing and whether they're a good player or not is very subjective, and can be down to many opinions. But that character side of it, those characteristics of getting through the process to get to that fulfillment of potential, well, that's possibly, for me, easier to measure because you can see those characteristics from an early age. So in answer to your question, for me at Southampton Football Club, I look for character and potential over the performance. So thank you, Tommy. It was a great question. I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit more in the Inner Huddle series when Jeff's back, and see what value he can offer with that, because he works with me with the Southampton Football Club Pre-Academy Development Centre as well, which is where the young ones, the under 6s, under 7s and under 8s from our area will end up if they're successful. So please look out for more. Please subscribe, leave a nice comment if you can, or an unnice one if you really want to, but please keep looking out for it, and hopefully we'll add a lot more value and answer a lot more of your questions that are coming in.